The rifle's weight in Katherine Hayes's hands felt like salvation and damnation all at once. But she was tired of weighing consequences when her life had been nothing but running for 3 long years. "They'll be here by nightfall," Sarah Clemens said from the doorway of the small cabin, her weathered face creased with worry. "You need to pack what you can carry and head south before the sun sets. There's a settlement near Pueblo where nobody knows your face." Catherine's fingers tightened around the Winchester repeater she had just finished loading, each metallic click of the ammunition sliding into place, marking a decision she had been moving toward since the moment she married James Dalton in the spring of 1879. That marriage, performed by a crooked justice of the peace in a Kansas railway town, had bound her to a man she barely knew, a charming outlaw who had swept her off her feet with promises of adventure and a life free from her strict father's control. She had been 18 and foolish, believing that love conquered all obstacles. 6 months later, James was dead, killed during a bank robbery gone wrong in Dodge City, and Katherine discovered that being an outlaw's widow carried its own special curse. The Dalton gang, what remained of it after James's death, believed she knew where he had hidden $20,000 in gold coins stolen from a Union Pacific payroll shipment. They had been hunting her ever since, forcing her to flee from Kansas to Nebraska, then to Wyoming, and finally here to Cannon City, Colorado, where she had found work as a seamstress and tried to build something resembling a normal life. "I'm done running," Katherine said, her voice steady despite the fear that made her heart race. She was 21 now, no longer the naive girl who had eloped with a smooth-talking criminal. 3 years of constantly looking over her shoulder, sleeping with a knife under her pillow, and never staying in one place long enough to make real friends had hardened something inside her. Sarah stepped fully into the cabin, closing the door behind her. "Child, you don't know what you're saying. Cole Dalton isn't like the others who have come looking for you. He's James's cousin, and he's killed men for less than what he thinks you've taken from him." "I didn't take anything," Katherine said, meeting the older woman's eyes. "James never told me about any gold. I didn't even know about the robbery until after he was already in the ground. Cole won't believe that. He's convinced James would have told his wife where he hid that money." Katherine turned back to the window, looking out at the dusty main street of Cannon City. The town sat in a valley along the Arkansas River, surrounded by red rock formations and mountains that glowed amber in the afternoon sun. It was October 1882, and the cottonwood trees along the river had turned golden. She had arrived here 6 months ago, and for the first time since James's death, she had begun to feel something like hope. She had a small business making and mending clothes, a clean room in Sarah's boarding house, and friends who knew her only as Katherine Hayes, the quiet seamstress from back east. "I won't let them take that from me," Katherine said. "I won't run any more." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of horses drew their attention to the window. 5 riders came down the main street at an easy pace, their dusters dusty from travel. Katherine's breath caught when she recognized the man in the lead. Cole Dalton looked like James, the same dark hair and sharp features, but where James had been charming and quick to smile, Cole's face was hard as granite. "Dear Lord," Sarah whispered. "They're here already." Katherine's mind raced. She had perhaps minutes before Cole came knocking, demanding answers she didn't have. The rifle in her hands represented a choice. She could try to fight 5 armed men alone, or she could do what she had always done and run. But something had broken inside her during that moment of loading the rifle, some final thread of patience or fear that had kept her moving for 3 years. "Go to the marshal," Katherine said. "Tell him what's happening." "Marshal Frost won't help you," Sarah said bitterly. He doesn't involve himself in anything that might bring trouble to the town. You're on your own, girl." The older woman's words stung because they were true. Katherine had learned that lesson repeatedly. The law rarely protected women in her position, especially not women connected to outlaws, even unwillingly. She was about to respond when she heard footsteps on the boarding house's front porch, then voices in the hallway below. "I need to speak with Katherine Hayes," Cole Dalton's voice carried up the stairs, rough and impatient. "I run a respectable establishment," Sarah called back, having hurried to the landing. "You can't just barge in here making demands." "Madam, I don't want any trouble. I just need to talk to my late cousin's wife about some family business." Katherine moved to the doorway, rifle held loosely at her side but ready. She looked down the stairs to where Cole stood in the entrance hall, his hat in his hands in a mockery of politeness. His 4 companions waited outside on the porch, visible through the open door. "I have nothing to say to you, Cole," Katherine said clearly. "I didn't know about James's activities when I married him, and he never told me anything about stolen gold." Cole's expression didn't change. "James trusted you more than anyone. He would have made provisions, told you where to find the money if something happened to him." "Then he trusted me with silence," Katherine said, "because I know nothing. I think you're lying." Cole's hand moved toward the revolver at his hip, a subtle threat. "And I think you'll remember better if we have a longer conversation somewhere private." Katherine raised the Winchester, pointing it directly at Cole's chest. The movement was smooth, practiced from weeks of secret practice behind Sarah's barn. "The only conversation we're having is this one. I'm done being afraid of you and your questions. Leave Cannon City and don't come back." For the first time, genuine surprise crossed Cole's face. "You're making a mistake." "The mistake was running in the first place," Katherine said. "I've spent 3 years paying for James's crimes when my only sin was being young and stupid enough to believe his lies. I won't pay any more." The tension in the hallway was thick enough to choke on. Cole's companions had drawn their weapons at the sight of Katherine's rifle, but the narrow doorway and stairs gave her a defensive advantage. If shooting started, men would die, and Cole knew it. "This isn't over," Cole said finally, settling his hat back on his head. "You've got until tomorrow morning to reconsider. After that, I'll assume you're choosing the hard way." He turned and walked out, his men following. Katherine kept the rifle trained on the doorway until she heard the horses departing. Only then did her hands begin to shake. "You've signed your death warrant," Sarah said quietly. "He'll come back with more men, or he'll burn us out, or he'll find some other way to force the truth from you." "I told him the truth," Katherine said, lowering the rifle. "I don't have his gold. The truth doesn't matter to men like that." Katherine returned to her room, her mind working frantically. Sarah was right that Cole would return, probably with reinforcements or a new strategy. Pointing a rifle at him had bought her time, nothing more. But she meant what she had said about being done with running. If she fled again, she would be fleeing for the rest of her life, always looking over her shoulder, never able to build anything lasting. She needed help, but where could she find it? The marshal wouldn't intervene. She had no family. Her father had disowned her when she married James. Sarah was sympathetic, but had no means to stand against Cole's gang. Katherine was considering her limited options when she heard a knock at her door an hour later. "Miss Hayes." The voice was unfamiliar male, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or New Mexico. "My name is Tanner McKinney. I'd like to talk to you about your situation with the Daltons." Katherine opened the door a crack, the rifle once again in her hands. The man standing in the hallway was tall and lean, probably close to 30, with sun-weathered skin and gray eyes that held a directness she wasn't used to seeing. He wore dusty trail clothes and a well-maintained Colt at his hip, but his hands were empty and held away from his body in a gesture of peace. "I don't know you," Katherine said. "No, madam, you don't. But I know Cole Dalton, and I know you're in a world of trouble." He glanced at the rifle. "Though you've got more spine than most folks who cross his path. That was quite a show downstairs. Were you watching?" "I was across the street at the saloon when Cole and his boys rode in. Followed them here out of curiosity." Tanner McKinney's expression was serious. "I've been tracking the Dalton gang for 3 months now. There's a reward out for Cole and his associates, dead or alive. $2,000 from the railroad and another $1,000 from the bank they robbed in Wichita." Katherine's mind worked quickly. "You're a bounty hunter." "Yes, madam. And I'm offering you a deal. You help me bring in Cole and his gang, and I'll split the reward with you. $1,500 would set you up nicely in a new place where the Dalton name doesn't haunt you." I told Cole the truth. "I don't know anything about the gold they're looking for." "I believe you," Tanner said, surprising her. "But you're bait whether you want to be or not. Cole won't leave Cannon City without answers, and he won't believe you don't have them. That means he'll make a move probably soon. I can use that." Katherine studied him, trying to read his intentions. He had an honest face, but so had James in the beginning. "Why should I trust you?" "Because right now, I'm the only option you've got," Tanner said simply. "Cole will come back, and when he does, you can face him alone or you can face him with me standing beside you. Your choice." It was a choice between bad options, Katherine knew, but at least Tanner was offering partnership rather than threats. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Let me stay here, keep watch. When Cole makes his move, I'll be ready. We take him and as many of his men as we can alive, turn them over to the federal marshal in Denver and collect the rewards." "You make it sound simple." "It won't be," Tanner admitted. "But you've already decided you're not running. At least this way you've got a fighting chance." Katherine made her decision. She opened the door fully. "All right, Mr. McKinney, we have a deal." Over the next few hours, Katherine learned more about Tanner McKinney. He had been a cowboy before turning to bounty hunting, working ranches across Texas and New Mexico. He was 28, unmarried, and had taken up tracking wanted men after his younger brother was killed during a stagecoach robbery. The men responsible had never been caught, and Tanner had made it his mission to bring at least some justice to a lawless frontier. "The Daltons aren't the worst I've tracked," Tanner said as they sat in Katherine's room that evening, keeping watch out the window. Sarah had reluctantly agreed to let him stay, though propriety demanded Katherine's door remain open. "But Cole's smart and mean, a dangerous combination. He's evaded capture for 2 years. James never talked about his family," Katherine said. "I didn't even know he had cousins in the outlaw business until after his death." "James Dalton was small time compared to Cole," Tanner said. "Cole's gang has hit banks, trains, and stage coaches across 3 territories. They've killed at least 6 men that we know of, maybe more," Katherine shivered. "And he thinks I'm keeping his money from him. That gold's become something of an obsession. James hit it well. The gang's been searching for it ever since the robbery." Tanner glanced at her. "You really have no idea where it might be?" "None. James and I were only married 6 months, and he was gone most of that time. When he was home, he was different than when we were courting. Distant. Angry. I think he regretted marrying me. More likely he regretted bringing an innocent woman into his world," Tanner said quietly. "Not every outlaw is completely heartless." They fell silent, watching the street as darkness settled over Cannon City. Lamps were lit in windows up and down the main road. The saloon across the way spilled yellow light and the tinkling sound of an out-of-tune piano. It seemed impossible that violence could erupt in such a peaceful scene, but Katherine had learned that violence often came when least expected. "Tell me about yourself," Tanner said after a while. "Before James, I mean." Katherine hesitated, then decided there was no harm in talking. "I grew up in St. Louis. My father owned a dry goods store. My mother died when I was 12, and after that it was just father and me. He was strict, very concerned with reputation and propriety. When I turned 18, he arranged a marriage for me with a man twice my age, a business associate of his." "Let me guess," Tanner said. "You ran away." "I met James at a church social. He was visiting St. Louis on business, or so he said. He was charming and handsome, and he made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. When he asked me to marry him and come west, it seemed like an adventure." Katherine's laugh was bitter. "I was such a fool." "You were 18 and trapped," Tanner said. "That's not the same as being a fool." His kindness surprised her. Most people, when they learned she had been married to an outlaw, assumed the worst about her character. "Father disowned me when he learned I had eloped. I wrote to him after James died, but he never responded." "His loss," Tanner said firmly. "You're brave, resourceful, and you've survived 3 years of hell that would have broken most people. That takes strength." Katherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. She studied Tanner's profile in the lamplight, noting the strong line of his jaw and the way his eyes constantly moved, always watching, always alert. There was something solid about him, dependable in a way James had never been. "What will you do after you collect the reward on Cole?" she asked. "Haven't decided yet. There's always another wanted man to track." He turned to look at her. "What about you? Where will you go?" "I don't know. I thought Cannon City could be home, but after this, staying here might not be safe. Cole's gang is larger than just the 5 men who rode in today." "You could come to Denver with me," Tanner said. "It's a growing city, plenty of opportunities for a skilled seamstress. You could start fresh where nobody knows your history." The suggestion hung between them, weighted with possibility. Before Katherine could respond, movement in the street caught her attention. 3 men had emerged from the saloon, moving with purpose toward the boarding house. "Trouble," she said quietly. Tanner moved to the window, his hand dropping to his revolver. "That's not Cole, but they're definitely Dalton's men. I recognize the big one from a wanted poster. His name's Dutch Carver, wanted for murder in Kansas." The men reached the boarding house porch. A moment later, there was pounding on the front door. Katherine heard Sarah's voice raised in protest, then heavy footsteps on the stairs. She grabbed her rifle while Tanner positioned himself beside the door, out of sight from anyone entering. Dutch Carver appeared in the doorway, his massive frame filling the space. He had a scar running from his left eye to his chin, and his expression was ugly. "Miss Hayes, you're coming with us. Cole wants to have that conversation now." "I'm not going anywhere," Katherine said, raising the rifle. Her heart hammered, but her voice stayed steady. Dutch's hand moved toward his gun, but Tanner stepped out from behind the door, his Colt pressed against the big man's spine. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. Tell your friends downstairs to leave or this gets messy." Dutch froze. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who'd be real happy to collect the $500 bounty on your head," Tanner said. "Now call off your boys." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Dutch called down the stairs, "Back off, boys. We've got a complication." "Smart man," Tanner said. "Now we're all going to walk downstairs nice and calm. You're going to tell Cole that Miss Hayes isn't interested in his hospitality, and then you're all going to ride out of Cannon City. Understand?" "Cole won't let this go," Dutch growled. "That's his choice to make," Tanner said. "But right now, you're making a choice too. Cooperate and walk out of here alive, or don't and end up in a pine box. What's it going to be?" Dutch's shoulders slumped in defeat. All right. No need for shooting. They made their way downstairs, Katherine following with her rifle trained on Dutch's back. The two men waiting in the entrance hall drew their weapons when they saw the situation, but Tanner's gun never wavered. "Tell them to stand down," Tanner ordered. Dutch did as he was told. The tension was thick as molasses as Tanner marched Dutch out to the porch. The outlaw's horses were tied at the rail, and Tanner watched as all three men mounted up. "Give Cole a message for me," Tanner said. "Tell him Tanner McKinney is in Cannon City and I'm taking a personal interest in Miss Hayes' welfare. If he's got a problem with that, he can take it up with me." Dutch's expression darkened. "You're that bounty hunter from Texas. Cole's heard of you." "Good. Then he knows I'm not bluffing." Tanner's voice was hard as iron. "Now ride." The three men departed, and Tanner watched until they disappeared into the darkness. When he turned back to the boarding house, he found Katherine standing on the porch, still holding her rifle. Sarah hovered in the doorway, wringing her hands. "You've just painted a target on your back," Katherine said to Tanner. "Cole knows who you are now." "I already had a target on my back," Tanner said. "That's the nature of my work. At least now Cole knows you're not alone." Sarah spoke up. "You both should leave tonight. Cole Dalton will come back with his whole gang, and when he does, people in Cannon City could get hurt. I don't want that on my conscience." "We're not running," Katherine said firmly. She looked at Tanner. "Are we?" Tanner met her eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. "No, madam. We're not running, but we are going to be smart about this. Come morning, we'll go to the marshal together and make sure he understands what's happening. If Cole wants a war, we'll make sure the law knows about it." They spent the night taking turns keeping watch. Katherine tried to sleep during Tanner's shifts, but rest eluded her. Every creak of the old boarding house, every sound from the street below made her start awake. When dawn finally broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, she felt exhausted but determined. Marshal Frost's office was a small building near the center of town. The marshal himself was a weathered man in his 50s with a gray mustache and skeptical eyes. He listened to Katherine and Tanner's story with growing displeasure. "So you're telling me that you've got the Dalton gang camped outside my town, ready to start trouble over some gold that may or may not exist," Frost said when they finished. "And you," he pointed at Tanner, "are a bounty hunter looking to collect rewards." "That's about the size of it," Tanner agreed. "But the important part is that Miss Hayes is an innocent woman being harassed by wanted criminals. That's your jurisdiction, Marshal." "My jurisdiction is keeping the peace in Cannon City," Frost said sharply. "And the best way to do that is for you two to leave town and take your problems with you." "I'm not leaving," Katherine said. "This is my home. I've done nothing wrong. You married an outlaw." "I married a man who lied to me about who he was," Katherine shot back. "That's not a crime." Frost sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, Miss Hayes, I sympathize with your situation, but I've got a town full of families to protect. If the Dalton gang decides to shoot up Cannon City looking for you, innocent people could die." "Then arrest Cole Dalton," Tanner said. "There are federal warrants on him and his men. You have the authority." "I have the authority to get myself and my deputies killed going up against 8 or 9 armed outlaws," Frost said. "I'm not stupid, McKinney. I know who you are and what you do. You make your living off violence. I'm trying to prevent it." Katherine felt her frustration rising. "So you're just going to let them terrorize me? I'm going to strongly suggest that you take the sensible course and leave town before this situation escalates." Frost's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Miss Hayes. I truly am, but I have to think about the greater good." Outside the marshal's office, Katherine wanted to scream. The morning sun was warm on her face, and Cannon City was coming to life around them. Merchants opened their shops, children played in the street, and a wagon loaded with supplies rattled past. It was a normal day for everyone except her. "He's not wrong," Tanner said quietly. "If Cole decides to attack, people could get hurt. So what are you suggesting? That I run after all? I'm suggesting we don't wait for Cole to make the first move." Tanner's eyes were thoughtful. "The Dalton gang is camped somewhere outside town. If we can find their camp, we could turn the tables on them." "You mean attack them?" "I mean scout their position, figure out their numbers and weapons, and then decide on the best course of action. Knowledge is power, Katherine." She considered his words. It was risky, but so was sitting in Cannon City waiting for Cole to strike. "All right, but I'm coming with you. It could be dangerous." "My whole life has been dangerous since I married James," Katherine said. "At least this way I'm facing it head-on instead of hiding." They returned to the boarding house to gather supplies. Sarah was unhappy about their plan, but provided food and water for the expedition. Katherine changed into her most practical dress and sturdy boots. She had learned to ride during her marriage to James, one of the few useful skills that relationship had given her. Tanner procured horses from the livery, and by mid-morning they were riding out of Cannon City. Tanner led them along the Arkansas River, heading west into the foothills. The landscape was breathtaking. Red rock formations rising against a brilliant blue sky, cottonwoods and willows lining the riverbanks. In different circumstances, Katherine might have enjoyed the ride. "Cole will want a camp with water and cover," Tanner explained as they rode. "Somewhere close enough to watch the town, but far enough for privacy. There's a canyon about 3 miles west that would be ideal." His instincts proved correct. They found the Dalton gang's camp in a narrow canyon where a spring fed into the river. 9 men lounged around a campfire, their horses picketed nearby. Tanner and Katherine observed from a ridge above, lying flat in the scrub brush. "9 men," Katherine whispered. "We can't fight 9 men." "Not directly," Tanner agreed, "but I'm counting. Cole's there, Dutch Carver, and 7 others. Most of them have prices on their heads." He studied the camp layout. "They're not expecting an attack. Look how casual their watch is." Katherine saw what he meant. One man sat on a rock at the canyon entrance, supposedly keeping guard, but he was more interested in whittling a piece of wood than watching for threats. The others were cooking, playing cards, or sleeping. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking we need help," Tanner said. 9 against 2 are bad odds, but if we could get the army involved or federal marshals from Denver. That could take days. Cole won't wait that long. Tanner nodded slowly. Then we need to even the odds another way. Split them up, take them in smaller groups. They spent another hour observing the camp, noting patterns and routines. Katherine's mind worked alongside Tanner's, and she found herself thinking tactically in ways she never had before. 3 years of survival had taught her to be strategic, to always have an escape route and a backup plan. As they prepared to leave, movement in the camp drew their attention. Cole Dalton stood, gathering his men around him. Even at a distance, Katherine could see he was angry, gesturing emphatically as he spoke. She wished she could hear what he was saying. "We should go," Tanner said quietly. "We've got what we came for." They retreated carefully, not wanting to alert the gang's lookout. Once they were safely away, they pushed their horses into a faster pace back toward Cannon City. The sun was past its zenith when they arrived back at the boarding house. Sarah met them at the door, her face pale. "Thank God you're back. A man came looking for you, Katherine. He left this." She handed over a folded piece of paper. Katherine opened it, her stomach sinking as she read the crude handwriting. "You got until sunset to bring me what's mine, or I start burning down Cannon City, one building at a time. Your choice. Cole." "That bastard," Tanner said, reading over her shoulder. "He's going to make the whole town pay for your refusal." Catherine's hands trembled with anger and fear. "I don't have what he wants. How can I give him something that doesn't exist?" "He doesn't care about logic anymore," Tanner said. "This has become about pride for him. You defied him, made him look weak in front of his men. Now he wants revenge. What do we do?" Tanner was silent for a long moment, his expression grim. Then he said, "We give him what he wants, or at least we make him think we're going to." "I don't understand." "Cole wants a meeting, wants you to hand over the gold's location. We arrange that meeting, but on our terms, in a place of our choosing. And when he shows up expecting you to cave, we spring a trap." Catherine's heart raced. "What kind of trap?" "The kind that ends with the Dalton gang in chains and Cannon City safe," Tanner said. "But we'll need help. Real help, not the marshal." "Who?" "The people of this town. Cole's threatening to burn their homes and businesses. I'm betting some of them would be willing to fight back if they knew there was a plan." It was a desperate gamble, but Katherine couldn't see another option. They spent the afternoon moving through Cannon City, talking to shop owners, ranchers, and townspeople. Tanner explained the situation, emphasizing that Cole Dalton would make good on his threat if they didn't act. To Catherine's surprise, many people agreed to help. "I've got a wife and 3 children," said Henry Morrison, who owned the general store. "I'm not letting some outlaw burn down what I've built. Tell me what you need." By late afternoon, they had assembled a group of 15 men willing to stand against the Dalton gang. They weren't professional fighters, but they were determined and they knew the terrain. Tanner organized them with military precision, assigning positions and responsibilities. "We'll lure Cole and his men into town," Tanner explained. "Katherine will send a message saying she's ready to talk, asking to meet at the church. It's centrally located and we can position our people in the surrounding buildings. When the gang arrives, we'll have them surrounded." "What if they start shooting?" asked Tom Bradford, the blacksmith. "Then we shoot back," Tanner said grimly, "but we'll try to take them alive if possible. There's more value in them breathing, both for the law and for the rewards." Katherine composed a message to Cole, her handwriting deliberately shaky to suggest fear and capitulation. "I'll tell you what I know about the gold. Meet me at the church at sunset. Come alone or with just one man. If you bring your whole gang, I'll disappear and you'll never find me." She signed it and gave it to a young boy with instructions to deliver it to the Dalton camp. The waiting was agonizing. Katherine changed into a dark blue dress, something that would blend into shadows if needed. She checked her rifle for what felt like the 100th time, making sure it was loaded and ready. Tanner stayed close, his calm presence helping to steady her nerves. "You don't have to do this," he said as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. "You could slip out of town right now, head to Denver while we handle Cole." "We've had this conversation," Katherine said. "I'm done running, remember? Besides, Cole won't fall for the trap if I'm not there. I know, I just had to offer." Tanner's gray eyes were warm. "You're something special, Katherine Hayes. Most people would have folded by now." "Most people didn't have much choice," she said. "I learned a long time ago that nobody was going to save me. I had to save myself." "You're not alone anymore," Tanner said quietly. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "Whatever happens tonight, you've got me standing with you." Katherine felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the evening sun. She looked at Tanner, really looked at him, and saw not just a bounty hunter or an ally but a man who had chosen to stand beside her when he could have easily walked away. A man who believed in her strength even when she doubted it herself. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Before Tanner could respond, the church bell tolled, marking the hour. It was time. They took their positions. Katherine stood in the church doorway, visible but with cover available if needed. Tanner was in the church tower with a rifle, giving him a clear view of the street. The townsmen were hidden in various buildings, windows cracked open to allow for shooting if necessary. Marshal Frost had refused to participate, but had agreed not to interfere, which was something. The sun touched the mountain peaks, turning them gold and crimson. Long shadows stretched across Cannon City's main street. Katherine's heart pounded as she watched the western road, waiting for riders. They came as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky purple. Cole Dalton rode at the head of his gang, all 9 men together despite Katherine's request. They moved slowly down the street, their hands near their weapons, eyes scanning for threats. Cole had chosen confrontation over caution. Katherine stepped out of the church doorway, standing in the middle of the street. The rifle was in her hands, not pointed at anyone but clearly ready. "I said come alone, Cole." Cole reined in his horse 20 feet away. "And I say you don't give me orders. You wanted to talk, so talk. Where's the gold?" "There is no gold," Katherine said clearly. "James never told me where he hid it because he didn't trust me. Our marriage was a sham, a convenience. If he shared secrets with anyone, it wasn't me." "Lying," Cole spat. "James loved you. He talked about you all the time, about how you were different from other women, how you understood him." The revelation surprised Katherine. James had shown her so little affection in their months together that she had assumed his feelings were shallow. Then maybe he loved me enough not to drag me into his crimes. Maybe keeping me ignorant was his way of protecting me. "Touching story," Cole said sarcastically, "but it doesn't help me. That gold is mine by right. James died before he could share it with the gang, and I'm not leaving Colorado without it." "Then you're going to be here a long time," Katherine said, "because I can't give you what I don't have." Cole's expression hardened. "Then I guess I start burning Cannon City like I promised. Boys, torch the general store." 2 of his men dismounted, pulling bottles from their saddlebags. Katherine's breath caught as she realized they were planning to make good on the threat immediately. Before the outlaws could light the bottles, Tanner's voice rang out from the church tower. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. You're surrounded, Dalton. Look around." As if on cue, windows opened in buildings up and down the street. Rifle barrels emerged, pointing at the gang from multiple directions. The outlaws' horses shifted nervously, sensing the sudden tension. Cole's head swiveled, taking in the trap he had ridden into. "This is your play, McKinney," Cole called up to the tower. "Hiding behind shopkeepers and farmers." "These shopkeepers and farmers are defending their town from a gang of wanted criminals," Tanner replied. "You're outgunned and surrounded. Surrender peacefully, and nobody has to die today." For a moment, Katherine thought it might actually work. The outlaws were clearly rattled, some of them exchanging nervous glances. But Cole's face twisted with rage, and she knew with sinking certainty that he was going to choose violence. "I'm not surrendering to a bounty hunter and his whore," Cole snarled. His hand dropped to his revolver. "If you want us, come and take us." Everything happened at once. Cole drew his weapon, firing at Katherine. She dove for the church doorway as the bullet whined past her ear. The street erupted in gunfire, the townsmen opening up from their positions. 2 of the outlaws went down immediately, hit by multiple shots. The others returned fire, using their horses as cover. Tanner's rifle cracked from the tower, and Dutch Carver tumbled from his saddle with a cry. The horses panicked, rearing and bolting. Cole managed to stay mounted, firing wildly as his horse ran. Katherine raised her Winchester from behind the church doorframe, tracking Cole's movement. She had never shot at a person before, and her hands shook as she squeezed the trigger. The rifle's recoil slammed into her shoulder, and she saw Cole jerk in the saddle. She had hit him, though she couldn't tell how badly. His horse carried him down a side street and out of the immediate battle. 3 more gang members followed, wounded but mobile. The rest were down, either dead or too injured to continue fighting. The gunfire ceased as suddenly as it had started. Smoke hung in the air, acrid and thick. Catherine's ears rang from the noise. She stepped out cautiously, rifle still ready, and surveyed the carnage. 4 outlaws lay in the street, unmoving. Dutch Carver was wounded but alive, cursing and trying to stanch the blood flowing from his shoulder. 2 townsmen had been hit, Henry Morrison clutching a grazed arm and Tom Bradford down with a leg wound. Tanner descended from the tower, his face grim. Cole got away with 3 of his men. We need to track them before they regroup. Track them in the dark, Katherine asked. The sun had fully set during the battle and twilight was fading fast. We wait until morning, they could be long gone, Tanner said. Or worse, they could circle back and hit the town from a different angle. Marshal Frost emerged from his office, his expression sour. You've turned my town into a battlefield. Your town is still standing and 4 wanted criminals are in custody or dead, Tanner shot back. You can thank us later. Right now, we need to form a posse to track the ones who escaped. Several of the townsmen volunteered, their blood still up from the fight. Within 20 minutes, a group of 7 riders was assembled, including Tanner and Katherine. Frost grudgingly agreed to watch over the captured outlaws and tend to the wounded townsmen. They tracked by moonlight, following the trail of blood drops and disturbed earth that Cole's group had left. The wounded outlaws had headed east, away from Cannon City, into rougher terrain. Katherine had never done anything like this, but she stayed close to Tanner, trusting his expertise. After an hour of hard riding, they spotted a campfire in the distance, sheltered in a small grove of trees near a dry creek bed. Tanner called a halt and they dismounted, approaching on foot. Katherine's heart pounded as they crept closer, weapons ready. Cole's group had made a hasty camp, more focused on tending their wounds than keeping watch. Katherine could see Cole sitting with his back against a tree, his shirt dark with blood. The 3 men with him looked in similar shape, exhausted and hurting. They had clearly not expected to be pursued so quickly. "We've got them dead to rights," whispered Jim Turner, one of the townsmen. "We could end this right now." "We take them alive if possible," Tanner said firmly. "They're worth more breathing, and I gave my word we'd do this legal." They spread out, surrounding the small camp. At Tanner's signal, they stepped into the firelight, guns trained on the outlaws. Cole's hand moved toward his weapon, but Tanner's voice stopped him. "Don't even think about it, Dalton. It's over. Your gang's dead or captured, you're wounded, and you're surrounded. There's no play left except surrender." Cole's laugh was bitter. "Over? You think this is over? There's still the gold, 20,000 in coins hidden somewhere in Kansas. You'll never find it, and neither will anybody else." "I don't care about the gold," Katherine said, stepping forward. "I never did. I just wanted to live my life in peace." Cole's eyes focused on her, and for the first time she saw something other than anger in his expression. It might have been respect or perhaps just exhaustion. "You're tougher than James gave you credit for. He always said you were soft, needed protecting." "People change when they have to survive," Katherine said quietly. "You taught me that." The fight went out of Cole then. He let his hand fall away from his weapon and nodded to his men to do the same. "All right, McKinney, you win. We surrender." They bound the outlaws and led them back to Cannon City, arriving near midnight. The town was still awake, people gathered in the streets to see the captured gang members. Marshal Frost took custody of the prisoners with obvious reluctance, but the evidence of their crimes was overwhelming. Federal marshals would be summoned from Denver to transport them for trial. Katherine felt numb as she returned to the boarding house. The adrenaline that had carried her through the evening was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Sarah fussed over her, bringing hot tea and drawing a bath, but Katherine barely registered the kindness. She had shot a man today. Cole had survived, the wound superficial, but she had pulled the trigger with intent to harm or kill. That reality sat heavy on her conscience. A knock on her door startled her from her thoughts. It was Tanner, his hat in his hands, looking as tired as she felt. "Can I come in?" Katherine nodded, too weary to worry about propriety. Tanner entered and sat in the chair by the window, the same place he had kept watch the night before. Had it really been only one day, it felt like a lifetime. "You did good today," Tanner said quietly. "You stood your ground when most people would have run or folded." "I shot a man," Katherine said. "I've never done anything like that before." "You defended yourself in this town. There's no shame in that, I know. It just feels strange. All of this feels strange." Katherine wrapped her arms around herself. 3 years I've been running from the Dalton gang, and now it's over. Just like that. "Not quite over," Tanner said. "There'll be a trial, probably in Denver. You'll have to testify about Cole's threats and harassment. But the hard part, the dangerous part, that's done." "What happens now?" Tanner was quiet for a moment. "The bounty on the Dalton gang will be paid out, probably $3,000 total with all of them captured or killed. Your share would be $1,500 like we agreed." "That's a lot of money. Enough to start fresh somewhere new. Denver, San Francisco, anywhere you want to go." Tanner's voice was carefully neutral. "You could open a dress shop, make a real go of it." Katherine studied his face, seeing the uncertainty beneath the calm exterior. "Is that what you think I should do, leave Colorado?" "I think you should do whatever makes you happy," Tanner said. "You've earned the right to choose your own path. What about you? Will you keep bounty hunting?" "I've been thinking about that." Tanner met her eyes. "This job, it's dangerous and lonely. I've been doing it for 3 years, chasing my brother's killers and men like them. But killing and capturing bad men doesn't bring my brother back. Doesn't make the world that much better when there's always another outlaw to replace the one you caught." "What would you do instead?" "I've always wanted to ranch. Raise horses, maybe cattle. Work the land instead of tracking wanted men." He paused. "There's good grazing land south of here, along the Arkansas River. With the reward money, a man could buy a decent spread and make a go of it." Katherine's heart began to beat faster. "That sounds like a good life." "It could be," Tanner said. "Especially if a man didn't have to live it alone." The words hung between them, weighted with possibility and hope. Katherine thought about everything that had happened since Tanner McKinney walked into her life 2 days ago. He had stood beside her when everyone else advised running. He had believed in her strength and helped her find her courage. And somewhere in the chaos and danger she had fallen for him, this quiet Texan with gray eyes and an honest heart. "Tanner," she said softly, "are you asking me something?" He stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "Katherine Hayes, I know we've only known each other a short time, and I know you've got every reason to be cautious about trusting another man after what James put you through. But these past 2 days, fighting beside you, seeing your courage and your heart, I've found something I didn't know I was looking for." "What's that?" Katherine's voice was barely a whisper. "A partner. An equal. Someone who doesn't need rescuing but chooses to stand with me anyway." Tanner took her hand. "I'm asking if you'd consider building that new life with me, not as an outlaw's widow or a bounty hunter's assistant, but as my wife and my partner in whatever comes next." Tears pricked Katherine's eyes, but they were good tears, joyful tears. "I spent 3 years paying for a mistake I made when I was 18. I married a man I barely knew and suffered for it. I swore I'd never be that foolish again." Tanner's expression fell slightly, but Katherine squeezed his hand. "But this doesn't feel foolish. This feels right. You see me as I am, not as someone to protect or control or use. You trust me to be strong." "You are strong," Tanner said, "the strongest woman I've ever known." "Then yes," Katherine said, her voice growing firmer. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll build that life with you. I'll stand beside you on that ranch and whatever else comes our way." Tanner's face split into a genuine smile, the first she had seen from him. He stood and pulled her up with him, wrapping his arms around her. Katherine leaned into his embrace, feeling safe and cherished in a way she never had with James. This was different. This was real. They married 3 weeks later in the same Cannon City church, where they had faced down the Dalton gang. The whole town turned out for the wedding, grateful to the couple who had saved Cannon City from outlaw violence. Sarah Clemens cried happy tears, and even Marshall Frost managed a grudging smile. Katherine wore a dress she had made herself, cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Tanner wore a new suit, his hair neatly trimmed and his boots polished. When the preacher asked if he would take Katherine to be his lawfully wedded wife, Tanner's "I do" rang clear and certain. Katherine's voice was equally steady when she spoke her vows, meaning every word about honor, love, and partnership. The federal marshals had come and gone, taking Cole Dalton and his surviving gang members to Denver for trial. Katherine had testified, telling the truth about James's deception and Cole's harassment. The judge had been sympathetic, ruling that Katherine bore no legal responsibility for her late husband's crimes. With that legal cloud lifted, she was truly free for the first time in years. The bounty money came through, and Tanner proved as good as his word, splitting it evenly with Katherine. Together, they had $3,000, enough to buy a substantial piece of land. They found a beautiful valley property 30 miles south of Cannon City, with water rights to the Arkansas River and grazing land that stretched for acres. The ranch came with a small house that needed work and a barn that needed even more, but it was theirs. They spent their first year as husband and wife building their dream. Tanner taught Katherine to rope and brand cattle. She taught him which wildflowers were edible and how to repair torn clothing without it showing. They worked side by side from dawn until dusk, and at night they fell into bed exhausted but content. Katherine discovered that she loved ranch life. There was something deeply satisfying about the physical labor, about seeing the direct results of her efforts in healthy livestock and productive land. She especially loved the horses. Tanner had a gift for training them, and Katherine helped, learning to gentle even the most skittish Mustang with patience and kindness. Their first winter together was hard but brought them closer. Snowed in for weeks at a time, they talked for hours, learning each other's histories and dreams. Tanner told her about growing up in Texas, about his parents who had died of fever when he was 16, about the brother whose death had set him on his bounty hunting path. Katherine shared her childhood memories, both good and bad, and her hopes for the future. "I want children," she admitted one night as they lay by the fire, wrapped in blankets. "I want to fill this house with laughter and love, make it a real home." "How many children?" Tanner asked, his hand resting on her hip. "At least 3, Katherine said. "Maybe more." "I was lonely growing up as an only child." 3 sounds perfect, Tanner agreed. He kissed her temple. "You'll be an amazing mother." Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle calved successfully, and Tanner bought a breeding pair of excellent horses from a rancher near Pueblo. Katherine planted a vegetable garden behind the house and was delighted when everything grew abundantly in the rich Colorado soil. And in May, She discovered she was pregnant. Tanner's joy at the news was boundless. He immediately became overprotective, insisting Katherine rest more and work less. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love. As her belly swelled over the summer months, they prepared a room for the baby, painting it yellow and building a cradle from pine wood. Their daughter was born in February of 1884, during a blizzard that trapped them in the house for 3 days. Tanner delivered the baby himself with Katherine's guidance, and when he placed the squalling infant in her arms, Katherine felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. They named her Sarah Rose, after the boarding house owner who had befriended Katherine and the wild roses that grew along the river in summer. Sarah was a healthy, happy baby with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. Katherine had worried that motherhood might overwhelm her, given her own mother's early death and her father's coldness, but she found it came naturally. She loved nursing Sarah, singing to her, watching her discover the world with wide-eyed wonder. Tanner was a devoted father, patient and playful. Katherine often found him talking to Sarah as he worked, the baby strapped to his chest in a carrier Katherine had sewn. He told their daughter stories about the ranch, about the horses and cattle, about the mountains that ringed their valley. Sarah seemed to listen, her tiny face serious, and Katherine would laugh at the picture they made. As Sarah grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Word spread about Tanner's skill with horses, and people came from across Colorado to buy his stock or have him train their problem animals. Katherine's sewing skills also became known, and she took on work making and mending clothes for nearby families, adding to their income. They celebrated their second wedding anniversary with a special dinner, just the two of them while Sarah slept. Katherine had made Tanner's favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and carrots from their garden. As they ate, Tanner reached across the table and took her hand. "I need to tell you something," he said. Katherine's heart skipped. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about Cole Dalton and the gold he was so obsessed with finding." Katherine's good mood dimmed. She rarely thought about James or the Dalton gang anymore. That chapter of her life closed and buried. "Why?" "Because I think I know where it is," Tanner said. "Or at least, I have an idea." "How is that possible? Nobody's been able to find it in 4 years." "That's because everyone assumed James hid it near where he stole it in Kansas. But what if he brought it with him when he traveled? What if he hid it somewhere along his regular routes?" Katherine frowned. James traveled all over. It could be anywhere. But there were places he went frequently. You said he was often gone from your home in Kansas. Where did he tell you he was going? "He said he had business in Colorado," Katherine said slowly. "He came to Cannon City several times. That's why I chose it when I was running. I thought maybe he had mentioned it because he liked the town." "Or because he knew it well," Tanner said. "James died in Dodge City, but before that, he was based in Kansas for nearly a year. And he made regular trips to Colorado." "Why?" Understanding dawned on Katherine. "You think he hid the gold in Cannon City, or near it?" "The payroll robbery was in March of 1879. James married you in April. He was killed in October. That's 7 months where he could have traveled to Colorado and hidden the money somewhere he could retrieve it later." "But where? Cannon City isn't that big. Someone would have found a cache of gold coins by now." "Not if it was well hidden in a place people don't normally go." Tanner's eyes were thoughtful. "I've been thinking about the geography. The river, the canyons, the old mining claims in the hills. There are dozens of places where a clever man could hide something." Katherine felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her wanted nothing to do with James's stolen gold. But another part, the practical part that had learned to survive, recognized that $20,000 could transform their lives. They could expand the ranch, hire help, ensure Sarah's future education. "Even if you're right, how would we find it?" she asked. "We'd need to think like James did. You knew him better than anyone. Where would he consider safe? Where did he go when he visited Cannon City?" Katherine cast her mind back to the early days of her marriage, trying to remember the few things James had told her about his trips to Colorado. He mentioned fishing, said the Arkansas River had good trout. "Lots of people fish the river. That's too general." He also talked about the hot springs, said they were beautiful, hidden in a canyon west of town. Katherine's eyes widened. "The same canyon where Cole's gang camped, where we found them that day." Tanner leaned forward intently. "That canyon has a spring, caves in the rock walls, and dozens of hiding spots. If James wanted to stash something valuable where only he could find it again, that would be perfect." They looked at each other across the table, and Katherine saw her own excitement reflected in Tanner's face. It was a long shot, perhaps even a foolish hope, but if they could find the gold, it would mean security for their family and closure on the last remaining thread of Katherine's painful past. "We'd need to search carefully," Tanner said. "It could take days or even weeks. And we'd have to bring Sarah or leave her with someone." "Sarah can come," Katherine said firmly. "We're a family. We do this together." They made plans to travel to Cannon City in the spring after the worst of the winter weather had passed. In the meantime, Katherine tried to remember every detail James had ever mentioned about his Colorado trips. It wasn't much. Her late husband had been secretive by nature. But she recalled him mentioning a rock formation that looked like a bear and wildflowers that bloomed in early summer. March brought the first warm days, and they loaded their wagon with supplies for a week-long trip. Sarah, now 13 months old, was delighted by the adventure, pointing at everything they passed and babbling excitedly. They arrived in Cannon City to a warm welcome. Sarah Clemens, now in her 60s, was thrilled to see Katherine and meet her namesake. The boarding house owner fussed over baby Sarah and insisted they stay with her. The next morning, Tanner and Katherine rode out to the canyon, leaving young Sarah in her namesake's capable care. The spring thaw had swollen the Arkansas River, and the canyon was lush with new growth. They tied their horses at the canyon entrance and proceeded on foot, searching methodically. "Look for anything man-made," Tanner instructed. "Disturbed earth, marks on rocks, anything that seems out of place." They searched for 3 days, finding nothing but animal tracks and old fire rings from previous campers. Katherine was beginning to lose hope when Sarah spotted something on the 4th day. A rock formation on the canyon's south wall did indeed resemble a bear when viewed from a certain angle. Katherine approached it, studying the surrounding area. "Tanner, come look at this," she called. He joined her, and she pointed to a narrow gap in the rocks, barely visible behind a curtain of brush. Together they cleared the vegetation and squeezed through the opening. It led to a small cave, no more than 10 feet deep but well hidden from casual view. At the back of the cave, they found a leather satchel wedged into a crack in the rock. Tanner pulled it free and they opened it with trembling hands. Inside were smaller bags made of canvas, heavy and clinking. Tanner opened one and gold coins spilled into his palm, glinting in the dim light. "We found it," Katherine whispered. "James's gold." They counted it there in the cave, $20,000 in gold coins, just as Cole had claimed. It had been hidden here for 5 years, waiting for James Dalton to return for it. But James was long dead and his widow had found it instead. "This belongs to the railroad," Tanner said quietly. "It was stolen from them." Katherine nodded slowly. She had known this moment would come if they found the gold. The right thing to do was return it to its rightful owners. But $20,000 was a fortune, enough to change their lives completely. "What do you want to do?" Tanner asked, leaving the decision to her. Katherine thought about the woman she had been when she married James, young and foolish and desperate for adventure. She thought about the woman she had become during 3 years of running, hardened by fear and loss. And she thought about who she was now, a wife, a mother, a rancher, a woman who had built an honest life through hard work and courage. "We return it," she said firmly. "I won't build our future on James's crimes. Sarah deserves better than that. We deserve better." Tanner's smile was proud and loving. "I was hoping you'd say that." They reported the find to the railroad's regional office in Denver. The railroad was astonished and grateful, offering a substantial reward for the return of the stolen money. Katherine and Tanner declined at first, but the railroad insisted, eventually giving them a 10% finder's fee of $2,000. It was still a fortune, and it came honestly. The money allowed them to expand the ranch significantly. They bought adjoining land, increasing their grazing area. Tanner hired 2 ranch hands to help with the increased workload, and Katherine was able to focus more time on their growing family. Their second child, a boy they named Thomas James, was born in 1886. Unlike his sister's easy temperament, Thomas was fierce and energetic from birth, keeping Katherine constantly on her toes. A third child followed in 1888, another daughter named Grace Elizabeth. With 3 children under 6, the ranch house was constantly full of noise and laughter. Katherine sometimes thought back to her lonely childhood and marveled at how different her children's lives were. They were surrounded by love, security, and wide open spaces to explore. As the years passed, Katherine watched Cannon City grow from a small frontier town into a proper community. The railroad brought more people and commerce. Schools and churches were built. The wild, dangerous West of her youth was slowly being tamed and civilized. In 1890, she received an unexpected letter. It was from her father in St. Louis. He had heard through some mutual acquaintance about Katherine's respectable life in Colorado. He wrote that he regretted their estrangement and hoped they might reconcile. He wanted to meet his grandchildren. Katherine showed the letter to Tanner, unsure how to feel. "He disowned me," she said. "He never responded when I wrote to him after James died." "People change," Tanner said gently. "And regret can be a powerful force as people age, but the decision is yours. I'll support whatever you choose." After much thought, Katherine wrote back, inviting her father to visit the ranch. He came that summer, a thinner, grayer version of the stern man she remembered. Meeting his grandchildren seemed to soften something in him. He stayed for 2 weeks, and by the time he left, Katherine had found a measure of peace with their past. "I was wrong to be so hard on you," her father admitted before he departed. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was just trying to control you. You've built a better life than I ever could have arranged for you." "Thank you for saying that," Katherine said, embracing him. "It means more than you know." They maintained a regular correspondence after that, and her father visited every summer to see his grandchildren. It wasn't a perfect relationship, but it was healed enough to bring Katherine closure on another painful chapter of her past. The ranch continued to prosper throughout the 1890s. Tanner's reputation as a horse trainer spread across the West, and they sold stock to buyers as far away as California and Montana. Katherine's sewing evolved into a full dressmaking business, with women traveling from Denver to commission her work. They hired additional help, built a larger barn, and expanded the house to accommodate their growing family. In 1893, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again at age 32. This pregnancy was harder than her previous ones, and their 4th child, a son named Daniel Tanner, arrived 6 weeks early. He was small and fragile, and Katherine spent sleepless weeks nursing him through those first difficult months. But Daniel proved to be a fighter, and he grew into a healthy, happy child. Their fifth and final child, a daughter named Caroline Marie, was born in 1896. Tanner joked that they had achieved Catherine's goal of at least 3 children and then some. Katherine laughed and agreed that 5 was quite enough. At 35, she felt complete in a way she never had before. The turn of the century found the McKinney family well established and prosperous. Sarah was 16, a beautiful young woman who had inherited her mother's skill with a needle and her father's way with horses. Thomas was 14, already taller than his father and eager to take on more ranch responsibilities. Grace was 12, bookish and thoughtful, with dreams of becoming a teacher. Daniel was 7, full of mischief and energy, and Caroline was 4, the baby of the family and thoroughly spoiled by her older siblings. Katherine stood on the porch of their home one evening in the summer of 1900, watching the sun set over the mountains. Tanner joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. They had been married 16 years, and she loved him more deeply now than she had on their wedding day. "What are you thinking about?" Tanner asked. "Everything," Katherine said. "How far we've come. How different my life is from what I imagined when I was 18. Better or worse?" "Better," Katherine said without hesitation. "So much better." "Yes, I went through terrible things with James and the Daltons. But those experiences led me here, to you, to our children, to this life. I wouldn't change it. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they made me strong enough to deserve this happiness." Katherine leaned into her husband's embrace. "They taught me that I could stand and fight instead of always running." Tanner kissed the top of her head. "I fell in love with your strength, Katherine McKinney. That moment when you loaded that rifle and told everyone you were done running, that's when I knew you were special. You gave me the courage to make that stand," Katherine said. "You believed in me when I barely believed in myself." They stood together in the fading light, watching their children play in the yard below. Sarah was teaching Caroline to braid horse manes. Thomas and Daniel were wrestling, their laughter carrying on the evening air. Grace sat under a cottonwood tree, lost in a book. This was the life Katherine had fought for, the life she had earned through courage and perseverance. She had been an outlaw's bride, a widow, a woman hunted and afraid, but she had refused to let those labels define her. She had loaded that rifle, taken her stand, and built something beautiful from the ashes of her painful past. And now, surrounded by love and looking toward a future bright with promise, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice all those years ago in Cannon City. She had stopped running and started living, and every day since had been a gift. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Tanner spoke again. "I got a letter today from the governor's office. They're organizing a celebration for Colorado's 25th anniversary of statehood next year. They want to recognize pioneers who helped build the state, people who made significant contributions." "That's nice," Katherine said absently, still watching her children. "They want to honor us," Tanner continued. "You and me. For returning the stolen railroad gold and for our work building the ranching industry in southern Colorado." Katherine turned to look at him in surprise. "That's quite an honor." "You deserve recognition," Tanner said. "You helped bring the Dalton gang to justice. You've built a successful business. You've raised 5 wonderful children. You're exactly the kind of pioneer Colorado should celebrate." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. For so many years, she had been defined by her connection to outlaws and criminals. To be recognized instead for her achievements and contributions felt like the final healing of old wounds. "Will you accept the honor?" Tanner asked. "Only if we accept it together," Katherine said. "Everything I've accomplished, I've done with you beside me." They attended the ceremony in Denver the following summer, bringing all 5 children. The governor gave a speech about the courage and determination of Colorado's settlers. When he called Katherine and Tanner to the stage to receive their commendation, the audience stood and applauded. Standing there in the state capitol, holding her husband's hand while her children watched proudly from the front row, Katherine felt the last shadow of her past finally lift. She was no longer James Dalton's widow or Cole Dalton's target. She was Katherine McKinney, rancher, businesswoman, mother, and pioneer. She had taken control of her own story and written it the way she wanted it told. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and milestones. Sarah married a rancher from Pueblo in 1902, giving Katherine her first grandchild the following year. Thomas took over much of the ranch's daily operations as Tanner began to slow down, his years of hard living as a bounty hunter catching up with him. Grace became a teacher in Cannon City, fulfilling her childhood dream. Daniel showed signs of wanderlust, talking about seeing California and the Pacific Ocean. And Caroline, the baby, developed a passion for horses that rivaled her father's. In 1905, as Katherine approached her 44th birthday, she and Tanner took a trip alone together for the first time in years. They rode to the canyon where they had found James's gold, now a place transformed in Katherine's memory from a site of treasure hunting to a symbol of choosing honesty over easy money. They sat by the spring, listening to the water bubble up from the rocks. The canyon was peaceful, beautiful in the late summer sun. Wildflowers bloomed in shades of purple and gold, and birdsong filled the air. "You ever regret it?" Tanner asked. "Returning the gold instead of keeping it?" Katherine shook her head. "Not for a moment. We built everything we have through honest work. That matters. It matters to me, and it will matter to our children and grandchildren. You're a remarkable woman, Katherine McKinney." "I'm a woman who learned that running from your problems never works," Katherine said. "You have to stand and face them, and if you're very lucky, you find someone who'll stand with you." Tanner took her hand, his fingers still strong despite the years. "I've been standing with you for more than 20 years now. Best decision I ever made." They sat together in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other in the chaos of the Old West and built a life together through love, courage, and determination. The world around them was changing. The frontier was closing, the wild days fading into history and legend. But what they had created together, the family and the ranch and the love, that would endure. As the sun set and painted the canyon walls in shades of rose and amber, Katherine thought about the frightened young woman she had been, the one who had run from town to town, always looking over her shoulder. That woman was gone, transformed by hardship and choices into someone strong and sure. Loading that rifle in Cannon City so many years ago had been the first step in claiming her own power. Everything that came after, the battle with the Daltons, the marriage to Tanner, the children and the ranch, all of it had flowed from that one moment of decision. They rode back to the ranch as twilight fell, arriving to find their home lit up and full of life. Caroline had invited friends over for dinner, and the house rang with youthful laughter. Sarah had brought her baby for a visit. Thomas and his new wife were there as well, announcing that they were expecting their first child. Grace had brought her students' latest assignments to show her mother, proud of their progress. Surrounded by family and looking at all she and Tanner had built together, Katherine felt a profound sense of gratitude and peace. Her life had not gone as she had planned when she was young. It had been harder, more dangerous and more painful than anything she could have imagined. But it had also been richer, deeper, and more meaningful. She had learned that love was not found in charming words and empty promises, but in the steady presence of someone who believed in your strength. She had learned that home was not a place, but a feeling of safety and belonging. And she had learned that the bravest thing a person could do was not run away from fear, but stand and face it, rifle loaded and heart ready. As Katherine tucked Caroline into bed that night, her youngest daughter asked, "Mama, tell me a story." "What kind of story?" Katherine asked, smoothing the child's hair. "A true one. About when you were young." Katherine thought for a moment, then began. "Once upon a time there was a young woman who made a terrible mistake. She married a man who was not who he claimed to be, and his crimes haunted her for years. She ran from place to place, never staying long enough to make a home or find friends. Until one day she decided she was tired of running." Caroline's eyes were wide. "What did she do?" "She loaded a rifle and told everyone who was chasing her that she was done being afraid. It was the scariest and the bravest thing she had ever done. And because she found her courage, she met a man who loved her for her strength. Together they built a beautiful life, and they had 5 children who were the joy of their hearts." "Is that story about you, Mama?" Katherine smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, that's my story. I want to be brave like you when I grow up. You already are, my darling, you already are." Katherine kissed her daughter goodnight and left the room, finding Tanner waiting for her in the hallway. He had been listening, and his eyes were warm with love. "You told it well," he said. "It's a good story," Katherine replied. "Hard parts and all." They walked together to their own room, and Katherine looked out the window at the ranch spread out before them in the moonlight. The barn and corrals, the pastures where their horses and cattle grazed, the garden that fed their family, all of it represented years of work and love and partnership. She had been told to flee again and again, to keep running from her past and the men who hunted her. But on that day in Cannon City, she had made a different choice. She had loaded her cowboy's rifle, stood her ground, and said the words that changed everything. "I'm done running." And in refusing to run, she had found everything she had ever truly wanted. Love, family, home, and the fierce joy of living life on her own terms. The Wild West was becoming history, but Katherine McKinney's story would live on in her children and grandchildren, a testament to the power of courage and the transformative nature of real love. As she lay down beside her husband that night, surrounded by the quiet sounds of their sleeping household, Katherine sent up a prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. Every hardship had been worth it. Every moment of fear had led to this peace. And every day going forward would be lived with the same determination that had carried her through the darkest times. She had stopped running and started living, and there was no greater victory than that.